Thanks, Chairman. My comments today about FBI chiefs testifying honestly and not lying to Congress are particularly relevant in light of your opening statement. Let me start with the basic fact behind all of this, that the current FBI director pled the Fifth.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse absolutely unloaded on FBI Director Kash Patel, and what he laid out is brutal.
In the matter where he ended up providing grand jury testimony, we've never had an FBI director come through this committee who had pled the Fifth before. As you know, when you plead the Fifth, to do it honestly, you have to have a good faith belief that your testimony would subject you to criminal liability, which meant if Patel was being honest, he had a good faith belief that his testimony would subject him to criminal liability. As that went forward, he ended up getting immunity from the government in order to testify. If this were a court, a civil court, a judge would allow an adverse inference to be drawn against the witness who had asserted the Fifth. In Patel's proceedings, we were never even allowed to get to the bottom of the grand jury testimony. Why he pled the Fifth, what he said, all of that was papered over as he went through this committee to confirmation. So for obvious reasons, I pursued that question, just as you would, Chairman, if the shoe were on the other foot. And I believe that Patel lied to us in the committee. He said that he couldn't share his grand jury testimony, and I'm quoting him here, because there's a court order on that case. He said, he said again, I can't go into court orders granted by the DC District Chief Judge. And then when I pressed him further, he challenged me saying, you want me to violate a court order? He then went on to say to Senator Booker that his grand jury testimony has been sealed by the Department of Justice, and I'm not allowed to discuss it here. Well, as it turns out, none of that was true. All of that was false. And we know that because the DC District Chief Judge, who he mentioned in his false statement to this committee, said, and I'm quoting the judge, July 2025, Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E allows witnesses like Patel to divulge the contents of their testimony, meaning that nothing was preventing him from doing so before the committee, unquote. So it sure looks like he lied about that. So in his recent testimony, I asked him again. And now he offered the committee a new and different lie, which is that he had released the transcript already. He said, first of all, I'd love my grand jury testimony to be released. I want it made public. And then he said, I wanted the transcript released, and I will get it to you, sir, to me. I wanted the transcript released, and I will get you the transcript. He said to me, we can confirm that pursuant to my action, that grand jury testimony has been released. The transcript. He said the transcript has been released publicly. He told Senator Booker, well, I don't have the grand jury transcript. That's why I released it. So, as it turns out, no transcript was released. He was making up that lie, probably to get away from having to answer our questions. But now we have an FBI director who first lied in committee about a non-existent court order and had that lie exploded by the actual judge who he claimed had him under court order, and then lied in committee about having released a transcript that we all know has not been released. I think on that state of facts, we're entitled to get the transcript that he says he wants us to have, that he says he released publicly, and that the judge has confirmed is not under any court order of protection. So, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you. I know you have a strong interest in FBI chiefs testifying honestly in this committee and not lying to Congress to try to get to the bottom of what is going on, because those seem like two pretty flagrant and obviously provable lies. And we'll follow up for further assistance to get to the bottom of this. But I don't think it's asking too much to ask the committee's support, to ask Director Patel to do what he says he has already done, which is to release the grand jury transcript of his testimony and provide it to us. Thank you.
This wasn't a policy disagreement. This wasn't partisan sniping. This was a sitting U.S. senator methodically accusing the FBI director of lying to Congress multiple times and backing it up with receipts. So let's break this down, because what happened in that hearing should stop everyone in their tracks. And the more you sit with this, the more unsettling it becomes. Because what Senator Whitehouse laid out wasn't just a disagreement over testimony. It was an indictment of how fragile accountability has become when power is concentrated at the very top. This wasn't about some offhand misstatement or a lawyerly parsing of words. This was about a senior government official constructing false barriers to avoid scrutiny, and then switching stories when those barriers collapsed. That matters. It matters because Congress is not a suggestion box. It is a co-equal branch of government with a constitutional responsibility to oversee the executive branch. When a witness, especially one seeking or holding immense power, misleads Congress, it's not a personal insult to a senator. It's a challenge to the system itself. And Whitehouse understood that. That's why his tone wasn't bombastic. He didn't shout. He didn't posture. He didn't turn this into a viral soundbite. Instead, he walked through the facts slowly, knowing that the weight of them would do the work for him. An FBI director who pled the Fifth. An FBI director who required immunity to testify. An FBI director who told Congress he was gagged by a court order that never existed. An FBI director who later claimed transparency by pointing to a transcript that was never released. At some point, this stops being coincidence and starts looking like strategy. And here's the deeper issue no one in that room could ignore. The FBI prosecutes people for lying. Entire cases are built on false statements charges. Careers are destroyed. Sentences are handed down. Lives are permanently altered, sometimes over lies far smaller than the ones Whitehouse is describing here. So the obvious question becomes unavoidable. If the standard for truth collapses at the top, what legitimacy does enforcement have at the bottom? That's the kind of question that doesn't just fade after the hearing ends. It lingers. It eats away at trust. And trust, once gone, is almost impossible to restore. What makes this even more disturbing is how routine it's starting to feel. We've become so accustomed to evasions, half-answers, and procedural smokescreens that outright falsehoods can slip by unless someone is willing to do exactly what Whitehouse did: slow everything down and force the record to matter again. Because the record is what lasts. Long after the headlines move on, long after social media forgets, the transcript remains. And in that transcript, according to Whitehouse, are statements that don't line up with reality, don't line up with judicial rulings, and don't line up with basic standards of honesty. This is the danger of normalizing dysfunction. Once lying becomes survivable, it becomes repeatable. Once oversight becomes optional, it becomes meaningless. And once institutions lose credibility, they don't collapse overnight. They hollow out quietly, until one day people realize there's nothing solid left inside. That's why this moment deserves attention. Not because it's flashy, not because it's partisan, but because it exposes a fault line running straight through the idea of accountability itself. You can support this administration or oppose it. You can like Kash Patel or distrust him. But none of that should override the principle that no one, especially not the FBI director, gets to mislead Congress and move on as if nothing happened. If there are no consequences here, the precedent is set. Future officials will learn exactly how much truth they can bend, how long they can stall, and how easily oversight can be worn down through delay and confusion. And that should concern anyone who believes institutions are supposed to serve the public, not shield the powerful. So the real question coming out of this isn't just what Kash Patel did or didn't say. It's what Congress is willing to tolerate. It's whether the system still has the will to enforce its own rules. And it's whether honesty under oath is still treated as a requirement or just a suggestion. Because once that line disappears, rebuilding it is far harder than defending it in the first place. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this crosses a line that demands real consequences? Do you believe Congress should revisit Patel's testimony under oath? And do moments like this strengthen or weaken your confidence in federal law enforcement leadership? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit like, subscribe for more deep dives into congressional hearings that actually matter, and share this with someone who still believes oversight is just political theater. Because sometimes, the most important battles for democracy don't happen in elections. They happen in rooms like this, over the simple question of who's telling the truth. And thanks for watching.